Welcome to Lawyerpreneur, where we discuss the alternate paths that allow lawyers to engage their entrepreneurialism and distinguish themselves from others, because being a lawyer doesn't have to mean doing business as usual. I'm your host, Jeremy Richter. Today's episode is brought to you by Alps Insurance, the nation's largest direct writer of lawyers' malpractice insurance. Founded for lawyers by lawyers over 30 years ago, Alps works directly with your firm, no broker or agent, and if you do have a claim, the Alps claims handling team is comprised of actual attorneys, all with private experience. Alps roots for the law firms they protect. They believe in your success and nurture your endeavors with industry-leading coverage, risk management resources, and accredited CLEs, offering practical advice for pioneering lawyers like you. And Alps has the slickest online application out there. Qualifying firms can apply, see rates, and bind coverage in about 20 minutes. Right now, you can get 25% off one CLE seminar from Alps. Go to alpsinsurance.com/CLE. That's ALPS insurance.com/CLE and use the promo code Lawyerpreneur upon checkout. In addition to the corporate sponsorship that helps pay for the hosting and transcription of the show, you can support Lawyerpreneur on Patreon at patreon.com/lawyerpreneur. For less than the cost of a 0.1, you can help pay for the time it takes in creating and editing Lawyerpreneur and receive copies of my two most recent books, Stop Putting Out Fires and Level Up Your Law Practice. Now, on to the interview. Today's guest is Lisa Lang. She is general counsel at Kentucky State University and is one of the co-authors of the book Networked. Lisa, welcome to Lawyerpreneur.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, let's jump right in. Today we're going to talk a lot about personal branding and marketing and how that applies to not only, I almost call this outhouse lawyers, but I guess that's not a nice term for us, but for law firm lawyers, but why is it also important for in-house lawyers to continue to develop their personal brand, once they go in-house?
I think first and foremost, lawyers who work in-house for a company need to understand that they are very similar to those lawyers that work in private practice. We have clients and we need to develop a brand because it helps the relationship that we have with our clients, our internal clients. Part of what a brand is, in part, is reputation, and you want your internal clients to trust you and to know who you are and what you're about, so they will come to you before there's problems to help proactively address matters before they become problems. That's one issue. The other reason I think that it is important is because in-house lawyers sometimes, I think, and myself included, have a tendency to wrap themselves up so much in with their identity, with that of their employers, that they almost get lost and they don't have an individual identity. And I think that is a mistake because, things happen. You never know how long you're going to be with the employer you have. You may decide you want to leave the employer that you have, or for whatever reason, the employer you currently have may seek to not exist. And so therefore you have to establish yourself personally so that if you do want to make a move, you have built a reputation with other people in your industry and with other lawyer colleagues.
So I know that you practice what you preach because I follow you on LinkedIn. And have been in touch a couple times about things, but tell us, how do you practice this personal branding?
So, I think it goes back to what is branding. Branding, in my mind, is just identifying who you are and what you're about and how you do it. And then that comes through in such as LinkedIn, in the posts that you do. Now, I have not actively practiced that throughout my entire career. I think I've really only started doing it in about the last 18 months. And initially, it wasn't something that I did in a real organized manner. But over time, I have thought a lot about who it is that I am, what is that I do, and what it is I want to be known for. And so I've developed pillars of thought leadership that I want to be known for. And so when I do a post, I try and think about how does that post fit into one of these 4 pillars. And in that way, I am trying to cultivate a reputation or an expertise in one of those 4 areas.
So looking at it from in-house counsel to looking toward outside counsel and to vendors, why is it important for you that those people, and I think you've probably answered this, but can maybe expound on it, that the people that you want to work with or might potentially work with be developing their own brand, doing their own marketing, and how does that potentially help you establish relationships with those folks?
Well, I think, it goes back to reputation. So one of the categories of people that you talked about were vendors. And part of the brand that I feel like I'm trying to develop on LinkedIn is that I am somebody who believes that collaboration is important and it's essential. I'm somebody who believes in innovation and technology. So I'd like to think that if there are vendors out there who see my LinkedIn posts, they will understand if we happen to do business, that is the kind of business approach that I take. And I think that it helps with that relationship because they know what to expect from me.
And I'll say from the other side of that equation, I really started on this personal branding marketing journey in 2016. I have talked about this on here before, but I was 4 years in and I started to recognize the need for me to develop my own place so that I could start to attract my own clients. And so what I did was I realized that the kind of marketing that my mentor did and was good at, he was a very extroverted person and loved going to conferences and mingling with people, that it was not sustainable for me. So I needed to find where my strengths lay and really tap into those. So I started writing and eventually started writing about the types of relationships that I wanted to have with my clients, which is also, I like to have a collaborative relationship where we can work toward each other with each other so that when I am, so I do insurance defense, when I'm handling an individual case, I don't want to just be handling that single case. I want to have an understanding of what are my clients' broader interest goals and how can we fit this within their needs. Are they in a place where they want to litigate more cases so that they can, have an understanding with plaintiffs' firms that, we need to establish who we are, or are they in a place where we need to get things closed out as quickly as we can? And so what I wanted to establish, or part of what I wanted to establish through my writing was, here's how I like to work with my clients. Here's the expectation I'm setting up front so that you can know when we work together, this is the type of thing that you can expect.
Absolutely. And as an in-house counsel, that is exactly what I want from my outside counsel. Because there is a difference between being an in-house counsel and an outhouse counsel. You got me doing
I got it stuck down.
Yeah. Those your outside counsel. Because you're right. I think what's really, really important is understanding what success means for your client and being able to not just understand the litigation, but understanding what your client does and what success means for that client. And sometimes it's not taking it to trial and winning a jury verdict. Sometimes there's other things at play, and I do appreciate and value outside counsel who understands that and is willing to get to know me as a lawyer and my client, the organization, and understand what we define success to be. So if that's your brand, I will tell you most in-house counsel appreciate that kind of outside counsel.
Well, let me go back to something too, because I think this talks about or goes to relationships and trust, and the interconnectedness of, you know, the business relationships that become personal relationships. You shared a story on LinkedIn, I think it was this past week, about a potential vendor, somebody that you know from LinkedIn, who y'all looked at working together, and it became clear to you that maybe it wasn't the right fit, and that y'all were able to have that conversation. Can you still tell that story for us?
Yeah, sure. So I think you probably know who that lawyer is. And what's so funny is when I did that post, it's just funny because it was like 2 seconds, and the very first person that responded to my post said, "I know who you're talking about."
Yeah.
That's Alex Sue. And what's so funny, you know, you talk about your journey on LinkedIn. Alex is my journey in terms of trying to figure out who I was, how to network, how to brand. He was probably one of the first people that I did connect with. And we were looking for a contract life cycle management system. And we had discussed what it is that his company Eversort used or produced. And you know, we actually had a few meetings. I did a demo, but it really wasn't the right fit for our company. But because of that relationship I had with him, and because of the relationship that we developed through posting and replies to posts, I began to feel like I knew Alex. And because I knew Alex, I began to trust him a great deal. And I knew that he believed the product that he was selling, that he wanted to make sure as a salesperson that he was making a good fit between the product and the company that he was selling to. And so that is his brand. And the very fact that I did that post and I described him, all the things that he did, and the qualities I saw in him, absolutely, there was just no question. Everybody knew who he was, because he had not only developed that reputation with me, he had developed that reputation with, I would think, hundreds of other lawyers on LinkedIn. And I think that he has a real high trust factor. And for a lawyer who's a salesman, I think that says a lot.
Oh, no doubt. And anybody who wants to know more about Alex, you can listen to the interview with him, since we're talking about him, on episode 25 of this podcast. You can also find him and follow him on LinkedIn. And this goes to, you know, I think really within the last year, I know for me, this has changed a lot, that my usage of LinkedIn since the pandemic has become much more personal. And where before, when I started using, like really actively using LinkedIn, it was still a much different space than it is now. And now it's become much more social media like than it was before. And I think that it has allowed for the development of personal relationships that may have started off as business relationships. And, you know, sometimes it runs the other way around too. I know that's particularly true for you, and in the writing of the book Networked. Tell me how that worked for you.
Yeah, so I would agree with that 100%. And, you know, as lawyers, I think sometimes we've been taught to believe that social media is not a good thing, and that somehow we're supposed to have a different persona as a lawyer. And it's not really personal. But what I have learned in the last 12 months, and especially since the pandemic began, is that I think there is a way to use social media in a way that is professional and will help you build relationships, because you want to do business with people who have values that align with your values. And when you look at a resume, or maybe when you go to a cocktail party, you don't really have the opportunity to understand or to see what a person's values are, and whether or not they align with yours. But what LinkedIn, especially as a professional social media medium, allows you to do is it allows you to connect and build relationships with other people who share the same values that you do, and it gives you that ability to connect and to build those relationships of trust. And so the book Networked resulted because I became part of a group of, at its height, about 50 women lawyers who had started to use LinkedIn during the pandemic, to build relationships for a whole host of reasons. And I think that our book Networked is so really interesting because all of us came from different perspectives and we were all going through different things, but a lot of the values that we all had aligned together, and we built strong relationships, and we used our relationships and LinkedIn to support each other in what we were trying to do on LinkedIn, or use LinkedIn to do. We had people who had lost jobs and were looking for new work. We had people who were trying to build businesses. We had people who were managing law firms and had to go through the stress of trying to let people go. I was on a college campus trying to figure out what the new normal was going to be when we went from in-person instruction to virtual. And, we just all had these different experiences, and the social media, LinkedIn, allowed us to come together, build relationships with each other, support each other, and then begin to build relationships with other people.
Yeah, I really like that. And I think there's so much, those relationships are so important. Particularly in something all of us are going through collectively, but we're also going through it individually and still continuing to figure things out. And nobody's ever seen anything like it before. So the ability to, just have an honest, genuine conversation with other professionals who are also trying to figure this thing out, it is invaluable.
Absolutely. And, and the thing that I like about it too, is I do think that there are things in the legal profession that need to change. And I think before the pandemic, there were people that it felt like people were going at problems, but it didn't feel like there was collaboration with trying to attack certain problems. So for instance, the whole concept of remote work. I think lawyers in particular thought that working remotely was not something that was sustainable. Well, guess what? With the pandemic, we've had to figure out how to make it sustainable. And for some people, it's actually been difficult because they've had to pair it with, for instance, homeschooling children.
Yeah.
But I do think that on some level, we're beginning to find as a profession that maybe it's something that we can do. And I also think mental health and mental wellness through these building of relationships and sharing personal stories, it is allowing us as professionals to start recognizing some of the problems we have with our profession and starting to work together to change and to make it okay to be able to share when you feel weak. Just because you're a lawyer doesn't mean you have to put on a strong face every day. You can be authentically you. You can have good days, but you can have bad days. And that doesn't mean that you're any less of a professional. And in fact, I think that it helps you connect with potential clients even more.
Yeah, I agree. But I will say that it's hard to do that and put yourself out there. Because even when I'm not a person that gets too personal in any public spaces, but when I put something out there about, hey, Yesterday I wrote about the fear of rejection, and that's something that some people who are salespersons can, be told no 1,000 times and they're a duck and it rolls off their back and doesn't get to them. But I do not like being told no, and it affects me. So even in writing something like that, which isn't terribly personal, it's not revealing anything about myself that I'm ashamed of, but at the same time, I have thoughts like, well, what if somebody from my firm reads this and what will they think? And so I think it's super helpful, but it's also still terribly difficult and, or maybe not for everybody, but it is for me to be vulnerable in that way, even though I know that it has utility and can help other people.
Oh, and I agree with that. And, and that's part of what my chapter was about. When I started a year ago posting on LinkedIn, and I started using it for something other than just a resume holder, that was absolutely my problem. You've got different types of participation on LinkedIn, and you've got people who are lurkers, and lurkers are people that read other posts, but they're afraid to post a comment, much less do their own post. And Alex Sue is actually the one who encouraged me to start sharing personal stories, because Alex is one of those people who has been so very vulnerable on LinkedIn. He talks about the fact that he did not pass the bar the first time. He was fired from a law firm position. And I remember probably one of the first times I actually stepped out and responded, did a reply to a post. I remember thinking I was crazy to do it for all the same reasons you did too. Oh God, what if somebody from Kentucky State University sees my response? But for whatever reason, partly because of the things I was going through at the time, I decided to do the post. And what I did not realize was that instead of getting negative comments, I got a lot of very supportive comments. And Alex started encouraging me to comment more on his posts. And so he's actually the one that helped me to come out a little bit more and feel a little bit more comfortable doing it. And I do remember the first time I did a post, as he encouraged me to do. I remember, I deleted it off of I deleted LinkedIn off my phone after I did it. And I thought, look at this. And I reinstalled it on my phone about 2 days later. And there was a ton of comments and they were all so positive. And so, there's going to be haters. And there are going to be people who, may not say nice things. But what I would say, at least on LinkedIn, in my experience, I've seen very little of that. That's why I'm not a big fan of Facebook.
Sure.
Actually don't even use Facebook anymore. Now that account I totally deleted.
Sure.
On LinkedIn, I think because you are not anonymous, because you are linked to your employer, I do think in general, people act a little bit more professionally, and it's easier to be vulnerable. Now, I am not as vulnerable as Alex is, but I have shared some things. And part of the reason I've been sharing things on LinkedIn in part is because I've been sharing it with my team going through the pandemic, because I think it's important for them. I think I have to be, a good leader and to show some, but I have to show that I'm just as vulnerable as they are sometimes too. And we work together to overcome some of those challenges.
I appreciate that self-assessment and the ability to be self-effacing like that, because a lot of times when we think about leadership, and I think that this is really prevalent in lawyer culture, is that we think we need to be strong all the time, and it's a fallacy and it's not realistic, and nobody actually is capable of that, but we think we need to project that. And so your ability to recognize my team needs to see these other things that I'm contending with so that they can be comfortable themselves in realizing it in themselves and expressing it and dealing with it. I think that's really valuable asset.
Yeah, and I think it's really important in times that we're going through right now, and I think with clients too, if you're going to make a mistake, you need to come out and say you made a mistake, or if there's something that you failed to have a conversation about, you need to be able to say, you know what, we should have talked about this. I didn't talk about it. It's my bad. So let's have this conversation now. And I think that when you are that kind of leader and when you establish that as your brand, then other people, loyalty and support, those things follow when you establish yourself as that kind of leader, I think.
Now that we've brought this back around to clients, I want to talk about marketing and branding as a way to establish expertise in a public setting. I know that you've written or are writing, I guess, several series, like you do a Do This, Not That series. And then more recently, I think you started a Why This, Not That series that you're doing for contract nerds. So how do you attempt to establish your expertise using, this public marketing and branding of yourself?
Yeah, so a lot of the posts that I do as it relates to Why This, Not That, there are some things that I see other lawyers doing that I don't necessarily, I find there are better practices. So using that series, I like to be able to point out that there may possibly be other ways to do things. And it's not just the act of doing that post and doing that series, but it is the conversation and the dialogue that comes with it. And so I think that sort of helps to establish me as an in-house counsel. Why do I do, what is it that I do and why do I do it? And that conversation and that dialogue gives other people an insight into who I am and why I do what I do. And I found the response to it to be very positive.
All right. On the other side of that coin, because you are also the client of law firms, what is useful to you as a client to see from lawyers that either you are working with or could potentially work with?
So when I first started, I was not connected to a lot of in-house lawyers. I was connected to a lot of outside counsel, and I would comment on their posts. And I think that it has opened up a real robust conversation about that relationship. Just like we talked about earlier in this discussion about what is it that an in-house counsel looks to from its outside counsel. And one conversation that I am trying to have with outside counsel in general is a conversation about diversity and inclusion. Because part of what I'm trying to do as an in-house lawyer and a leader is to try and find law firms that provide quality services, but that law firms are starting to put an emphasis on ensuring that they have diversity within the firms that we're using, and not just that there's diversity within the firms, but then those firms are taking those attorneys that are diverse and making an inclusive culture to keep them there and move them up to a management role. So I'm using LinkedIn for the purpose of talking to not just, potentially my outside counsel for some of the matters that I have, but outside counsel in general. And somebody who has really done that and done it well is the general counsel for Coca-Cola. They have shared on LinkedIn a letter that he submitted, that Coke has submitted to all of its outside counsel and say, listen, this is what our expectation is. And so LinkedIn has been a really good platform for in-house counsel to be able to have conversations with outside counsel in general, saying these are the expectations our companies, our clients have, and we really need you all to step up your game so that we can, like for right now, we're trying to get Mansfield certified. And to be Mansfield certified, we need to be able to have outside counsel firms that have shown a commitment to raising women and women of color, especially up into management and leadership roles within law firms.
Oh, that's really an interesting way to use it and to go about it. I want to switch tracks a little bit because we've talked a lot about specifically, networking and branding to improve your law practice, your career. You also write a good bit about fulfillment and contentment outside of just your career, or maybe being fulfilled within your career. And so I want to quote you to yourself, which I know people always love.
Yuck.
And have you just share some more about what this. Okay. You wrote, "I have made so many career choices that others, family included, thought made no sense. It is because of those choices I am completely content now. Don't get me wrong, the path was never smooth and it was never easy. Not all of my employers thought I was the best fit, but all of my experiences prepared me for the career I was always meant to have."
Yes, that is a quote that I recognize. I say it quite often.
Tell me, maybe not about specific choices, but how did you continue to progress, even though it's not, and I know that Alex and I talked about this, he keeps coming up in this podcast, but that not everything appears linear. Not all of the things in our career are linear. In my own career, that's certainly been the truth. I started off as a school teacher and got a master's in history, and then went to law school and had some experiences that ultimately I landed where I am now. And none of that appeared linear at the time, but all the dots connected. How did you, whether it was intentional or happenstance, end up with where you feel like now you're having the career that you were always meant to have?
Yeah. So, I think part of the problem is that we try really, really hard as lawyers to start down this path and have it all figured out. And I really think that is somewhat of an unrealistic expectation, especially for lawyers, because you go to law school and what you understand about the law is really been framed, if you come from a family of lawyers, it's what you see on TV. And you go through law school and you learn about the law, but you don't really learn about all of the different ways to practice the law, and all of the different possible jobs that you can have. And sometimes it feels like when you go to law school, there's this emphasis on big law and private practice, or you go into criminal defense, prosecution, or you become a clerk for a judge. It feels like you are not given a fuller picture about what the options are that are out there. And for me, what happened was, so you talk about starting in education. I did too. I started down the road. I went to school to be a teacher, and I did large part because in my senior year of high school, I did a senior debate, and I thought I wanted to be a lawyer, but it was the absolute probably worst experience of my life. And because I felt like I failed in front of an entire auditorium of my classmates and teachers, that I decided that law was not going to be something that I was going to do. And so I went to school to be a teacher, but until I got to my senior year of college, I thought, oh my God, that's not what I want to do either. So I thought, okay, the law is something that I'm interested in. I had gotten married, and my husband was in the military, and he got deployed, and I started taking paralegal classes at night because, heck, what are you going to do with an English degree? Because I was not going to be. And so I was like, ooh, I think I kind of like this. And I thought, I'm still not completely sure I want to be a lawyer, so I'll be a paralegal. My husband was in the last year of his service and was going to be getting out, and I was supposed to have a job as a teacher, and I didn't. So I decided, while he was deployed, that I would join the Army as a paralegal, and I would see about being a paralegal. So I spent 6 years in the military as a paralegal, and I would say that the time in the military taught me a lot about the mechanics of law and leadership. And it was after that time, and when I decided to get out, that I decided to go to law school. And at that time I had a family, and the family depended on my income. So I got out, and I was a paralegal at a law firm in Louisville during the day, and I went to law school at night. And so, I say all that just to say it was a journey, because I was constantly trying to figure out, what am I good at, and what made me happy. And so, I went to law school. I became an associate at that firm for 4 years. And when you're in private practice and you start as an associate, I was in insurance defense as well. Not everybody that goes into private practice is going to be somebody that the partners of your law firm are going to want to make a partner. And you get to a point where it's either, you move forward on that partnership track, or it's clear that you're not headed that way and you do something different. And so, then there was another stage where, okay, this may not be the right fit, the right thing. And so then I went and I worked for the Attorney General's office, and I started representing state agencies that were education state agencies. And I started to build a reputation as a litigator in the education space. And then over time, the education agencies no longer wanted me to just represent them. I moved over and I became in-house counsel and did some litigation with them. So, it's people couldn't understand why I jumped from, I was supposed to be a teacher, then I didn't. Went into the military. People thought I'd lost my mind. I decided I'm not staying in the military. Then I'd go to be a paralegal. And then people thought I was nuts to be a paralegal during the day and a lawyer, or go to school to be a lawyer at night, but all of these things helped me to move forward in my career. And I love this Steve Jobs quote. And, as I look back on how I made it from going to school to be a teacher to now being a general counsel of a university, this Steve Jobs quote really resonates with me. It says, you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backward. So you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. So what I talk with a lot of people when I'm talking about this journey as a lawyer is that sometimes you can't know all the answers. You put yourself out there and you figure out what it is you're good at. You figure out what it is you like. And all of the things that you do along the path will help you to realize, at some point in your career, your strengths. And that's where I feel like I am today.
I really like that. And I think that is a excellent place to leave off. So where can people find and follow you?
So I'm on LinkedIn, and best way to look is Lawyer Lisa Lang, because it's kind of a common name I have. So.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for your time. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening, and I hope you've enjoyed today's show. Please take time to rate and subscribe at whatever podcatcher you're listening on. And if you want more from me, you can find me at jeremywrichter.com. You can also find me on Twitter at RichterJW. And if you want the extra audio and benefits available at Patreon, you can become a patron at patreon.com/lawyerpreneur. Thanks for listening.